Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. Um, it is a new thing for me. I really enjoy being in person. People who know me personally will say, oh, yes, we usually get together and we hug and we talk to each other face to face and we can feel each other's energy. So, being online virtually is a whole new learning experience for me. So, thank you. This is my first time doing something like this online virtually. So, you are my first guest. So, welcome. Um, I am here in Atlanta, Georgia, and right now there's a thunderstorm happening. So you might hear thunder and lightning and that sort of thing in the background. Hopefully it will not drown me out. Um, Before we get started, I'd love to find out where you all are in the world. I know this invite went out definitely here to people in the United States, but I know I have friends elsewhere in the world who have shared it with their networks. And so if you don't mind going to the chat and just typing in maybe your city and state, if you're comfortable, just your state, your country, if you're outside of the United States. Oh, someone from Jamaica and Maryland, Atlanta, let's see, Australia, welcome. Minneapolis, Chicagoland, Greensboro, California, East Point. Welcome, welcome, welcome from wherever you are calling from. Thank you for making time to come and talk with me about community. Something that I am extremely passionate about is community building. That's what I have been doing for the last 20 years. And so I thought it was time with so much going on in our world. There's so many things happening. But especially within the homeschool and unschool communities, we are seeing that more of us are joining the ranks because COVID-19. We're not able to be together in person. Schools are closing. Parents are trying to figure out what are we going to do with the children in the fall. And one of the ways that we've been making it through this time is by being connected to community. And so community is a vital part of what I think everyone's plan should be for the fall, especially those of us who are looking to homeschool our children. And so that's what's prompted me to have this conversation. Um, I'm seeing a lot of beautiful things happening online. Lots of people are willing to share their resources and their know-how about how to get started with homeschooling. If you're trying to unschool, there have been conferences people are offering, but no one has been talking about how do I find the community that I need. And so I said, let me jump in this conversation. Let me help people who are looking so that they can find the connections that we all need, whether we're going to be in person or not. You need to be able to be connected to people who are like you in some way, shape, or form. And so this evening's conversation is going to focus around that. Taking a moment to look at my notes. So just a little about me before I get started in the conversation about community. I am an educator by training. I have taught for about 10 years in the classroom before I came home to start my own family. So my education experience, I've taught K through 8th grade with the primary focus being around the second and third grade ages, which I love those ages. That's before school takes the joy out of learning. So that was my favorite age. I presently have 3 teenagers. My eldest will be 18 this year. So I've been doing this homeschooling, unschooling, life learning journey for a while. Um, my children have never experienced conventional education. And so I've always been seeking and looking for and building community since we've been started. One of the things that got me started when I first came home was, of course, looking for other mommies who were at home like me. And that took me going through several different groups. Things you show up for something and sometimes you don't gel with somebody, or you go somewhere else and you didn't get the full information, so you're at the wrong entrance. So I had a lot of bumps and hiccups, and I finally found a really small group here in Atlanta, Black stay-at-home moms. They welcomed me right in. I remember being excited. They were able to immediately pair me up with some other families that had my children that were the same age. We hit it off. I did several years with them until their group folded. And those of us who had who have been connected during that time started talking about, what are we going to do with our kids? Are we going to put them back in school, or are we going to homeschool? And that's when homeschooling showed up on my radar. And that's when I said, hey, we should stick together. If we're going to do this, we're going to need the support of each other. And so from that point forward, I've been cultivating a community here in Atlanta. If you're local, you may have heard of Kid Cultivators Homeschool Community. If you're not local, it's fine. There are lots of communities around the country that have started for that very reason, because those of us who have been out here trying to do things haven't really fit in spaces that may have already existed, or maybe just too far for us to get to. And so that's why I started the space, and I've kept that going. I've continued to learn and grow with people, figuring out what works for us, looking at our goals, comparing our values, and definitely making sure our needs are met. And so that's what this conversation this evening is going to be about. Before we jump in, I do want to ask for your participation right off. Right now, we're muted just so that everyone can hear clearly. And so while you're muted, if something resonates with you, seeing you nod, or a thumbs up, or even a comment in the chat for other people who can check in, that's a way for us to interact with each other, even though we're virtual. If we get to, there will be two spaces and times during this presentation that I will ask for your questions, and I will be asking you to type them out, and we'll look in the chat and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. I do encourage you to have a notebook and a pen. I'm good about having details to share, and a great way to keep up with it is to write it down for yourself. This is being recorded, so it will be shared at a later date for people who weren't able to join in this time. And so be mindful of that as well. So we're going to get started with talking about your specific family. So I want you to put on, I don't know, in school, I'll be a little schoolish and say, your thinking caps, and picture your family. Think about who's in your family, who makes up your family. You may have a spouse, you may have a partner, you may be co-parenting, you may be single. Think about each of your children. You may have an only child or several siblings. Think about your family right now. We're going to start talking about your family's needs. And so as I walk through this first slide of things to think about it in relationship to your family. So all of us have needs. We have basic needs, needing a place to live, needing water, needing exercise, needing food, needing companionship. There are other needs that your family might need that may be the same as somebody else or different. Start writing those needs down. I'd like you to think about your individual needs first, so the adults' needs, and then the children needs. Then you want to think about the family's needs. So as a family, you might have some of the same needs as you do individually. But for example, I may need time alone to be quiet, as just a healthy way to be. And so one of my children may not need that same alone time. So when you think about the individuals, then you want to think about the family as a collective unit. So you want to look through the physical needs of your family, your emotional needs, your spiritual needs, your mental needs, and your interpersonal needs. Those things are going to help you figure out and match up with a community. So definitely take the time to jot those things down. You might even want to have a conversation with your young people. Ask them. Sometimes we think that children are too young to know what they need, but you'd be surprised what they tell you. And sometimes they don't really know. But in that conversation, you awaken them to thinking about, oh, maybe I do need time to myself, or maybe I do need exercise. So those are conversations you definitely want to open up to your family, so that you all can identify those things as individuals and a whole unit. So let me see some of the things you came up with. Put a couple of your needs in the chat. Maybe they're individual needs, maybe these are your family's needs, but what are some of the needs that have come up for you just in thinking about it right now? And I'm gonna look. Daily exercise, sleep, yes, physical movement, time to read or restore personally, time in nature. I need and enjoy alone time, yes. Time with friends outside the house, fun and laughter, socialization. Yes, these are all needs that we have. And your family may find out that you go deep. People in your family may be very similar in their needs, or you might find out they're very different. And so, how are we going to make sure all our needs are met in this diversity of needs? So that's definitely a conversation that you want to have with your family. Now we're going to talk about your family's values, because values are different than your needs. Um, in the same way that you're going to look at your individual needs, you're going to look at your individual values. So what I did, and I encourage each of you to do if you're short on trying to figure out what are my values or what are some options for values, if you do a Google search for family values or values, you'll find several different lists that will have multitudes of different options. This is just a sampling that I took from a list of 250. I quickly picked 27 that sounded like, oh, yeah, these are some values that I have. And you may share some of them: acceptance, exploration, productivity, focus, beauty, challenge, common sense, humor, stewardship. Those are just a few of the things that just jumped out at me when I looked at the list. Now, what you want to do is definitely look for yourself, talk with your parenting partner or your spouse, and have your kids go through a list. I would even encourage you printing out a list, sharing it, giving each other highlighters or markers, and kind of letting everyone go through the list on their own, and then talk about what came up for everybody. You may have to explain to the younger ones what some of the words mean or how it shows up in your life. And after that, you may want to then say, you picked 100. Well, let's narrow that list down. You want to get your list down to something that's manageable. So I would suggest maybe a list of 20 that you then hone down to 10, that you then hone down to 5. And those can be prioritized by the needs of your family, of course. Some people refer to those top values as your core values. So these are the values that you need regardless of what the situation that's happening in your life. Another way to do it may be to say, okay, these are mine. Let me see what yours are. Values are the things that we kind of prioritize our life around. And so being able to identify what they are, name them, understand why they are something, see where they may be in conflict with somebody else in your home, work those things out together. Let me see some of your values. Some may be from this list, and some may be those that you know already. So let's go back to the chat. What are some of the values that you may have that you know your children have? Integrity, awareness, truth and acceptance, compassion, peace. Oh, these are wonderful. Discernment, kindness, empathy, independence, patience, fairness, love, acceptance, generosity, and service. Thank you so much. Those are the ways we show up. We show up for things that we value. So before you show up to something, knowing that it's of value to you will give you reason to continue to show up for it. Something I was reading the other day about values specifically was just a reminder that our values change. Um, I was looking at a list and realizing some things that I valued back in college, I know that I no longer value in the same way. They're still on the list, but they're not on my top 10 list. So just know that about life. Know that about your children. As you learn and grow, as they learn and grow, adjustments are going to need to be made. So this is something you're going to need to revisit every so often. I'd say every couple of years, you're going to want to pull these things out and let's make sure we're still in agreement. Let's make sure these are still things that matter to us. So once you've prioritized your values, you have your needs listed, you've prioritized your values, Next, we move to family goals. So your family goals are informed by these first two things. So I've created just some categories where you can start listing some of your goals. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and you are more than likely able to find other things to add to it. So feel free to do whatever feels right for your family. But these are the ones I have used. The main categories are relational goals, and then practical goals, financial goals, and academic goals. And then I've broken down the relational goals into four subcategories: the eternal relationships that we have, the relationships to self, the relationships with others, the relationship to the planet or the environment, and wildlife. So as you think about those goals, I want to give you some examples, maybe some other things that will spark your ideas around coming up with your own family list. So in talking about relationship goals, when we're looking at eternal goals, that's typically when we deal with our spiritual practice or religious affiliations. And a lot of times those things influence those goals. But your family may have specific goals around how you all want to engage spirit. And so that's something that you want to clarify, to know, and to prioritize in your family. Relationship to self goals. Those goals are going to look like the caring. So self care, your self awareness, your self acceptance, your self control, helping your children develop those same sets of practices. So you want to do things that you can model for your children. So your relationship with yourself helps your child and children set up their relationships with themselves. I'm sure a lot of us have probably seen the meme that says, yourself, the way you speak to your children becomes their self-talk. And so those are ways that we can have a goal of being positive, but if we're not practicing that for ourselves, it's hard for that to transfer to our children. And so we want to be aware of that. With relationship to others, of course, that's your family and then extended family and friends and neighbors and all the way out to the greater community. How do you want to interact? Maybe those goals center around communication. I saw some of the values about being honest and being compassionate. That's definitely ways to practice come in with being with other people. So you definitely want to have goals around that when you're thinking about other people. And finally, under that subcategory, the relationship to the world, or people may say the planet or the environment. There are lots of ways we show up, and sometimes the ways we live may not be as sustainable as our values may say. So you want to get in alignment. Some guiding questions to help you with figuring out what your goals may be in that category may be: how do we care for the earth? How do we dispose of waste and excess? Is it sustainable? How is our lifestyle impacting not the environment, the wildlife? Are we clearing too many things out? We may want a garden here, but is this the best place to put our garden? Are we going to displace some natural wildlife that we actually need to have thriving in our environments? So you want to be thoughtful in those ways too. The next heading was practical goals, and many of us already know those as they are typically life skills. And so practical goals may be exercising weekly or joining a sports team and being part of a team. They may have to do with cooking. You may want everyone in your house to have the goal of personal hygiene and care. That's important. Cleaning up around the house, picking up after oneself. Those are things that fall under practical goals. You may have a goal that says, everyone that in the house is going to learn how to do each of the chores thoroughly so that when it's their turn, they can do it without supervision. And that may speak to your value of independence or self-starter or self-motivation. So these goals definitely can tie back into your values. The next one is financial goals. These goals can be definitely individual or as a family. So some examples of those may be learning to write out a budget and stick to it. Maybe you have a child that wants to save up their money for something special. Maybe it's a computer, or maybe it's a pet, or maybe it's a class they want to take that's above and beyond what you've budgeted for classes. Maybe your family has gotten with other families and you're sharing a larger family goal of, we want to go in and purchase land together. So these are financial goals that your family may have. And you want to identify those things so you know what you're working towards. Last but not least are academic goals. And these definitely fall under, for those of us who are unschooling or homeschooling, you have goals around how you want your children to learn. They have goals too. This is definitely a time you want to rope them in to find out, what are the things you want to learn about? What are the things you want to grow in? What things do you want to learn? What Maybe it's a career choice they want to take. Maybe they want to become a dentist. And so you already know that's going to be a lot of years of schooling. And so maybe one of your goals is centered around doing well in academics so that you can qualify for scholarships. And so that would be an academic goal. It may be that you have a child in middle school or high school that has a requirement of taking a foreign language. But instead of just leaving it on that one child, maybe your family takes that goal on and says, we're going to learn Spanish fluently as a family, as opposed to just one child figuring out on their own. There's a lot of ways you can do these, hold these goals and do it with your family. So the more engagement you can have, um, with your children, because this affects them directly too. A lot of times it's easy for us who like to be in control or like to manage to hold everything, but we don't have to. The wonderful thing is we can share this load. Part of this time of COVID and being with our families, if you're so blessed to be with them at this time, is that you get to pour into them. You get to observe. You get to have conversations that school sometimes interrupts. Life sometimes interrupts those conversations. And so don't shy away from this. This feels like a lot of work. It may seem like a lot of work because it is. But this is the important work. This is the work that is going to help you do a lot of things. While for this particular conversation is going to help us find the communities we're looking for, it's actually going to help you figure out, what curriculum do I need? If you already know your needs, your values, and your goals, it will steer you clear of all the choices that are out there. Same thing about resources, same thing about classes. Right now, there are lots of people that are offering things to homeschoolers and unschoolers and other people just at home, just because we're all a captive audience at home. And it's easy to just click, oh, I'm going to join this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And you'll find out, if you look back, your schedule is jam-packed full of things, where now if you know what the things are that are important to your family, it's easy to say no, or no thank you, if you prefer a polite term. So yes, definitely take the time to do this work. Do it with your partners, do it with your children. Have it so that you can refer back to it. Know that it's dynamic. We are dynamic people. And as things come up for us and as things change for us, these things will change and you'll have to come back and revisit it. One of the practices I have with my children was, at the beginning of every school year, I would write out the things I wanted them to do. And there'd be a lot of things. These are the skills I want you to learn. These are the activities I want us to be involved in. These are the places I want us to go and see and participate and be a part of. And then I'd ask them, you make your list. And then we'd sit together and I have these, I would call them my parent student conversations, and they bring their list and I show them my list and we talk about them. And then on our little board, we make a list and they get their top 10 and I get my top 10, and we put it together and we mix it up, so that I knew that some of the things that I felt were important, because I could see down the road a little further than they could, were on the list. But it actually spoke to, here are the things that are of interest to them. I want to make sure that they know that it's not just going to be what mommy says. It's definitely going to be what I'm interested in. And so that's a partnership you can start developing now with your children, so that you have their trust, they have your trust, and you can walk through this time. Definitely if you're homeschooling for the long term. So something else you may be interested in doing at this moment, once you have your goals and your needs and your values listed out, something that I have encouraged families to do is then to create a vision board for that particular year. Just a list. It can be pictures, it could be words. Again, it's however your family wants to show up. But it's just a way to have a touchstone through that particular year of what is our focus this year? What are we valuing this year? What are we putting up as important? That's something you can make individually and put it together as one big collage. It's something you can work on together, but it's something I encourage parents put up in a place where you're going to see regularly so that you can be reminded on a daily basis of the things that you are agreeing to in your family. Again, this just layers nicely with knowing who you all are, what you value. You then can start saying yes and no with ease and without apology. So now we're going to, or before I move into the next segment, I want to make sure there are no questions that I may need to help anybody with. Are there any questions that anybody may have at this moment? If you want to put it in the chat. So we're good. Okay, I don't see any, so we're going to move forward from here. So the next part of the conversation is I want to just give you an overview of the type of communities and groups that are available. There are lots that are available, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming. Where do I begin? What do I start with? And so the next slide is just going to show the overview. I'm going to read them off and then I'll go through each of them. Some of us are new to homeschooling, some of us are seasoned, some of us just want to know some better options. So I'm going to also be using community and group interchangeably. So if you hear that, I'm speaking about the same thing. So these are the types. Again, this is a broad list. They do overlap. They're not strict categories, and I'm sure there are going to be new communities and groups that will be popping up over this year due to COVID. But they're support groups, they're activity-based groups, they're co-ops, they're hybrid spaces, they're intentional or conscious communities, and then there are online networks. And so I want to just talk about the first one to start off with, support groups. Those are a general type of homeschooling community. People that want to get together and socialize. They want their children to have friends. They want to have friends. They're usually low threshold, get in, come, and have fun. And sometimes you can find these support groups that are based around a specific philosophy. So you may find unschoolers that get together, or homeschoolers that are focused on a particular way of homeschooling. Maybe I know that there's a local group that is a Charlotte Mason group. And so they have a support group around that. There are also support groups that are faith-based. So you might have one at your local church or your local mosque. Those are places that, again, they're there as just a way to engage the community, to develop those friendships that we sometimes miss out on having if we're not intentional, that school has sometimes offered us just because it's a go-to. The next type of group on this list is an activity-based group, and it's just what it says. So these groups are sometimes they're a group of people that get together. They may say, we do field trips together. If you're in the southeast region of this country, the US, there is an online field trip based group that's for this area. And the ladies that lead the group, they flood the timeline and the calendar with all kinds of field trip options. And you join the group, you basically plug in, you say, I wanna go to a puppet show. I'm gonna be there on Tuesday at 10 a.m. There are gonna be other homeschoolers there. You may or may not know them. They're not necessarily trying to get you to meet other people, but they're creating the opportunity where you can. Other examples of activity-based groups would be clubs and teams. For example, you may have a child that's interested in chess. So joining a chess club, that's a activity-based group. You may have children that want to compete against and with other children. So you might join a robotics team or a beta club. You might join a swim team. Homeschoolers are even forming soccer teams and football teams. So the 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 options are as limited as your own ideas. Some people are creating them themselves. Some people are just doing a great job at searching and finding them to plug into. The next one is co-ops, and co-ops is just a small, or it's abbreviation for cooperative. And it just means a group of families have gotten together to do a particular thing together. Typically, it has been classes. So these can be classes that are core subject taught or extracurricular taught or just skill-based. It's whatever those families have decided to get together and do together. Co-ops are also um, can be based on philosophy or faith or interest. Some of them have a fee associated with them. So when looking for these spaces, you definitely want to find out the particulars of them. More recently, I'd say in the last 5 to 7, maybe 9 years, more hybrid spaces have been opening up for homeschoolers. And basically what those are, they're traditional schools that have somehow created a program where homeschoolers can plug in for a couple days a week to get those core subjects. Or maybe it's you want to plug in for gym time or the other sports that particular school may be providing. And so the the 1 to 3 days a week that your children may be engaged there. They're getting their academics there, and then the other days of the week, it's on the parent to continue to do the things they would do for homeschooling. More recently here in Atlanta, we have had some hybrid spaces looking for students who are in the self-directed or unschooling model. So we have several hybrid spaces geared specifically for self-directed. And those spaces are usually for those children who are middle school, but mainly high school. So they really have a handle on what they want to do. And so these spaces are really creating the space where they can connect to maybe on the job opportunities, apprenticeships, just opening them up to the network of the leaders of the school so that they can continue doing that self-directedness just with more guidance outside the parents' personal network. The next type are intentional or conscious communities. And those communities, again, are usually based around something intentional or something conscious. So knowing what those are, a lot of people use those terms interchangeably and even talk about, I want to be with like-minded people. And I always say, make sure their mind is actually like yours. Find out what they're intentionally getting around and doing together. What are they consciously doing together? Some of these examples of some of these communities are maybe a parenting style. So you might have a gentle parenting conscious community that is homeschooling. You may have an intentional community that they want to actually live together communally. You may have intentional communities that are thinking about the relationship that they have with each other. And so they're very intentional about that. So again, knowing what the community is about, looking back at your own values, needs, and goals and seeing if those match up. So you're finding a space that matches nicely with your family. Last but definitely not least are online networks. Because we are all physically distancing, hopefully you're at home with your family being safe during this time. Being online is an easy way to initially find these communities. Um, Facebook, if you're on Facebook, there are tons, and I say tons, there are tons of homeschooling communities and groups based on all kinds of things. You could do a search based on your location, city and state, country. You could do a search on the type of homeschooler. You may be an unschooler. You may be a classical homeschooler. You may be more self-directed. Do a search based on that. You may be looking for an age group. So preschool homeschoolers or elementary school homeschoolers or high school homeschoolers. You may be looking for advice. So talking to people who have finished homeschooling or who are at the end of homeschooling. You may be wondering, can my homeschool or unschooled child get into college? So there are homeschool groups that are there to help parents figure out the transition between homeschooling to college. Doing searches based on your specific needs and interests will pull up those communities, and you'll be able to click on them, read about them, and join them. One thing I'll say is it's easy to join, and flood your feed with so much information you become overwhelmed. So I say be selective. That's why you've taken the time to identify what your family needs, what you value, so that you can match up nicely with these communities. Some communities will tell you up front what they're about. And I would say believe them. If they tell you we're here to share resources, know that that's what they're going to do. Join in. And when you get to a place where you can offer it back, share yours. So it's not just you don't have to remain in a position of receiving. There's some groups that are all about trying to sell you something. I typically shy away from those groups. I initially join them to see what options are out there. So they'll usually have people that may talk about a specific curriculum or maybe a specific online class your family might be interested in. So you may join for a time, and then once that fulfillment has been met, you can unjoin a group. And that way, you're keeping the things in priority with what your family actually needs. So again, you're not overwhelming yourself. You're not feeling like, "Ooh, this is too much," because it can feel like too much a lot of the time. And so being able to monitor what you're letting in can definitely help your own spirit, your family spirit, how you all function. Some other places to look for community, your personal networks. One, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I told her, you should ask your family to see if somebody in your family already homeschools or is unschooling. And she was like, oh, I hadn't even asked. Most people now, you probably know someone personally. You may not know right off that they were homeschooling, but now more of us are coming out of the shadows, as it were, because it has become more popular, and with so many other people who will be homeschooling in the fall, their choice or not, they're looking for that support. And so you may have people already in your network that you can start connecting with, that you can have conversations with. Definitely check out YouTube. While YouTube is not necessarily a typical community, it is a place where people go to find information. And similar people start looking for the same types of things. And so you may follow a homeschooler that's walking you through how to use a particular curriculum, or how to set up a classroom in your home, or how to deschool, or all kinds of topics. Look in the comments. There may be certain people who are always commenting. You may want to reach out to them if you're comfortable doing that. That's a way to find people that are interested in the same things you're interested in. Another place to look is meetup.com. That's another it's social media, but it's a way that they're trying to get people to meet in person. So while those meetings may not be happening right now due to COVID, that's definitely a community space. That's where I found the first community of Black stay-at-home moms years ago when I was looking for them. So it's a way to find people locally to you. While it's easy to get used to being online and used to sending messages or used to commenting or used to posting, I always encourage everyone to have an in-person community. You want people, while we can't see and touch and be with right now, you still want people you know you can do that with. One of the things I've been talking about with the people I'm in community with is that we're going to have to figure out how to be together during this time. We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to figure out, maybe we share, create germ pods where certain ones of us pair up, or we quarantine 2 weeks before we see each other and then quarantine after. We're going to have to figure out how to be with each other because we need physical in-person encounters. And so I encourage you, while you're building online, while you're connecting online, while you're looking online, while you're using the resources online, definitely be looking to make some in-person connections. People who are on the ground where you are, people that you could do a drive-by and wave to, people that you know when things are going crazy, you can pick up the phone and you can talk to them, and you know what's happening right here in my city, they're experiencing that too. So definitely keep that in mind as you figure out where you want to show up. This conversation can get longer and longer. The more I planned for this, the more I saw, oh, I can tell them this and I can tell them about this. And I don't even want to overwhelm you, because it's a lot to take in if this is the first time you're thinking about it, or even the first time you're coming back to revisit it. And so I have set up some additional conversations. And so I'm going to pause this conversation now, because I do want to take questions. And I have tech support. My partner is available. And so if you have a question about types of communities, about how to find community, maybe something that I've said has sparked again, you want to talk again about maybe values or needs or goals, any questions that you may have right now, I welcome you. Maybe you can do, I don't know if he can see the hands raised or the thumbs up, or you can even type it in the chat and we will unmute you and you can share your question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tijane. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you so much. And thank you for this platform that you are providing such a wealth of knowledge. Myself, I definitely am new. I am in Lawrenceville, Georgia.
Okay.
So
Okay.
right now, this would be I have a rising third grader, so you'll be going to third grade. And so I am trying to just, what sparked my interest kind of was the hybrid model that you spoke of. And
Yes.
so my question related to that is, when you are finding those schools that you can kind of phase into those few days a week, how does that, I guess to say, the grading and kind of the curriculum and all of that, what, I guess to say, does that kind of look like? Or should I kind of have some tips to, when I'm looking at that, just that whole kind of, not all the way fully coming out of school, but maybe like still in that middle ground, because unfortunately I can't continue to work from home. I have to return back, and
Okay.
so does my husband. So that's why it's kind of teetering right now before I can, decide what it will really look like if we go into that full model. So hybrid kind of seems more our speed at this moment.
Okay. So each school is different. Some schools offer up to 1 to 3 days. Some are Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It really depends on the specific school you're looking at. They will definitely be able to answer your questions around curriculum. Now, if you're using them as a homeschooler, the great thing about being in Georgia is we don't have much oversight. And so you would still be responsible for the actual grading that you choose to do with your children. And so while the hybrid school maybe they're taking math on the third, you said they were third grade level, maybe they're taking a math class. And so that grading would still happen there, but the final say would be yours as a homeschooler. Now, if you change that, if you engage them more than just a couple days a week, I know 2 schools up north of the city offer a full program, but I'm not sure of their terms. So again, I would definitely direct you to speaking directly to those schools to find out those particulars.
Okay, thank you so much.
You are most welcome. Thank you for your question. I have a question in the chat. Do you write your own curriculum? Do you do a hybrid with existing curriculum or another option? Okay, those are 3 different questions. So I will start with, you can, as a homeschooler, write your own curriculum. That is definitely something you can do. With regards to engaging a hybrid program, whatever classes that your children are taking, that's going to be on the hybrid school side. So you would be talking to those teachers, that principal, the school leader there, and they would kind of tell you what the parameters were around that. And then you would end up supplementing whatever you felt your children needed in addition to that. Let me look at the rest. There are other options if you don't engage a hybrid school. You could purchase a curriculum and join a community that helps you teach that, or do that as a standalone, or you can do that in partnering with another family. I hope I'm answering your question. Let's see, there's another one. Do you have suggestions on how to create some type of community if there is none in your location, like creating a hybrid space? Yes, 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 yes. I do, and I have two conversations coming up. The second one is in 2 weeks, and I will be focusing on how to engage in community so you can get the best, your family can have the best experience possible. And then I have a following conversation that is geared around for those who would like to begin or start a community specifically, or get with families and start their own. And so I will go into great depth about the answers to those questions during those conversations. But I will say, yes, suggestions to start small, start with people that your values match up with, your goals are similar, and that way the beginnings can not be as bumpy, because it's hard to start. And it's going to be definitely challenging to start during this time when you can't always be with the people you want to be with. Let me see. I would love the Southeast field trip group information. Okay, that's great. So we will, if I will share with you, where you can find other information and links that I will share. I'm not plugging any particular space in this particular conversation, but I definitely have resources that I will be sharing online so that you can go to my social media platforms and you can just screenshot it and it'll be a list of things. But I think if you just did a Google search for Southeast field trip group, you find it immediately. I think it's the only one in this area. Do you have recommendations for curricula? With regards to what specifically? General or subject-wise? Claudia, who's the one who asked that question, can you give me a little bit more
General.
of it? General?
Yes, because this is new to me. And something general, like for math, reading, and science, that's the most confusing part for me when it comes to homeschooling, knowing which curriculum like offers you, like, no, it tells you day one, day two, it breaks it down, what you need to teach, how to teach it, and all of the same foundations that they have in traditional schools, math, reading, science. But I just want one that's very good, that teaches the child to think for themselves independently, but can always give me a manual to, like, what do I teach, instead of me creating it myself, something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. And what I will say is, no, I do not. I was a hodgepodgey kind of homeschooler when I was homeschooling, and now my family is unschooling. And so I have been creating. I do know of several groups that I can refer you to that people have gone through different curricula and can give you can answer your question specifically. If you had caught me maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I would have had a good answer for you, but I do not anymore, and I don't want to lead you astray. But what I can say is, I can share some links to people who do have that knowledge, so that you can get your questions answered in a way that meets your needs. Any other
I'm
questions?
wondering if I could just make a comment, if that would be okay.
Okay.
When I started homeschooling, it's been quite a few years now, but I also was like frantic about which curriculum I was going to use, and I wish that someone would have said to me, when I decided to pull my daughter out of kindergarten, don't just assume you want a curriculum. Maybe take a year and really look at your values and your philosophy around education, and really explore all the different ways of a learner can learn outside of the school system, and then from there decide what it is that you want to use for your family's learning. Because it's not just what, and I also wish they would have said, and make sure you're not coercing your child into learning that. Make sure they're on board too. So just, there's lots of ways to do it, and I'm not negating curriculum at all. I'm just saying that the exploration of what and the different ways about going about learning outside of the education system is vast. And so to ground into what it is that resonates with you and your family.
Thank you for that, Randy. That's wonderful. That's a great reminder to everyone. I have a mutual community member friend who posted in a group online, what would it look like if folk took a gap year? What if we just kind of paused and got to know our children a little better? Um, so that's definitely something I've been kind of putting out there too in other spaces. What would it look like if you just kind of lived with your family? A lot of our lives have been so busy. And a lot of times we feel like we're behind something. What if we said we're not behind anything? The whole world is having to pause right now. What would it look like if we stopped panicking about, oh, and just let's be here, let's be now, let's be family together, let's be community with each other. Let's get to know ourselves and the people that we're raising. And that way we know when we are looking for other people who are doing the same, we can recognize those people. Something that Spirit has put in all of us is our intuition. And so there is definitely something that we bring to spaces where our senses tell us things that sometimes we've been socialized not to believe our eyes and our ears and our guts. Our children already, if they're young children, you know they have it. You haven't gotten out of them that soon. And so being able to trust those things, that's one of the things I've always taken into community spaces. Is I don't only take myself, I'm bringing my children. And so I'm looking at how they react to spaces. I'm looking to how do they feel comfortable? Is there something about them that's making them contract? Is there something that's making them expand? All these things are healthy ways, they're natural ways, they're God-given ways for us to recognize where we need to be in the world, who we need to be with, who we need to be spending time with. I'm seeing another question.
Can I piggyback on something that Randy said as well?
Yes.
I'm
Who am I speaking with?
This is Michaela in Jamaica.
Oh, welcome, welcome.
So I'm a teacher, and so this year, when COVID happened, my school, we called it a distance learning program because to us it made more sense because it really wasn't homeschooling, because what everyone was thrust into was very different from what homeschooling really is. Mm-hmm. And so in the place of I had to be teaching online with my students while I had my 8-year-old at home who is also learning with his teacher, but me having to help him. Yeah. And then I was made redundant in June. And so while I was thinking, okay, what's next? When I was thinking of if I had to homeschool him, what would it look like? I was also, just based on how I saw him reacting to everything, I think one way is the student-led, the child-led way. Mm-hmm. And so what I started doing was writing down things that he was genuinely interested in. Mm-hmm. And getting more books. Like he likes Geronimo Stilton and things like that. So I would get more books that he liked. So reading time wasn't necessarily forced. It wasn't a chore. It was something that he liked to do. So my focus, if I had to stay home if I had to figure out some kind of employment for myself while teaching him, was to mainly kind of focus on reading, figuring out what he likes, and incorporate those topics into everyday life. Mm-hmm. So I think the reading and the math, just to kind of make sure that the math sensibilities grow over time. And this is a discussion that, you know, us teachers have been having for some time, because yeah, curriculum is what you create. A lot of time we think that the textbooks is curriculum, but it's a book company. They're just printing things in chapters, and we think that it has to be that way. Like, okay, September they have to learn decimals, and October they have to learn fractions. But even us as adults, we learn better with things that we're interested in. So I think the student-led way is very good.
Definitely. Thank you for your comment.
No.
And just to echo that again, is just the more you learn who you have been gifted with, the more everything else is going to fall into place. You may find out you do need curriculum. You may have a child that has an interest that you're going to need some information and knowledge that you don't already have. Having a community that you can reach out to and say, hey, does anyone know how to X, Y, and Z? And not you don't have to be the expert in your home. You shouldn't strive to be. And getting out of the way sooner allows your children to grow up and see that there are times they're going to know. There's sometimes they're going to know more than you. There are times that they're not going to know. There's sometimes we're going to have to reach outside of our family to get the help that we need. We know this as adults. We know this. When you need something and you don't know how to do it, you know how to find out. You call a friend, you do a search online. These are the skills you want to pass down to your children. These are the spaces you want to have where you're with community people who are also practicing those things with you. It's a place to continue to practice. Okay, I have another question I'm going to read. What about the fear of traditional schooling that states the law regarding truancy and enrollment? Homeschool, unschool have documents that are needed. Yes. So what I will tell each of you, wherever you are living, if you are living within the United States, I know for sure each state has its own regulations. We are not regulated as a country. And so going to your state's Department of Education and then searching homeschooling or home education or learning at home, one of those three will bring up your state's guidelines. Some states have specific detailed, you have to belong to a program or you have to have your school system's oversight or something like that. Some states, it's up to you. Right here in Georgia, it's up to us. We no longer even have to turn in attendance. And so we basically, at the beginning of every school term, which is September 1st here in Georgia, we just have to alert our state that we are homeschooling and they trust that we're going to do it all. Now, most states' websites will have links to general associations. So your local, the Georgia Association of Homeschoolers will have a link on the Georgia page. So if you're in Ohio, look for your national or your state's association. And that's a first place to start to talk to an actual person, because most of the people who work for the state have no idea what homeschoolers are doing. And we don't want them to know. So you want to reach out to another homeschooler to get advice. Some states like California have a long list of resources. And so you can find people local to specific cities there. And they have people on the ground that will come and walk you through whether you're using a curriculum. California also has a large community of unschoolers there. So they have an unschooling association that unschoolers can at least plug into, whether it's to meet other people or to find resources that fit better with their family's needs, goals, and values. Any other questions? Let me look back up. There's one. Yes. Of course, I'm going to plug my girl, Akila S. Richards at Raising Free People. She is a wonderful resource. She and I have been friends for many years. I'm actually partnering with her and be joining the Raising Free People Network. I am doing some mentoring as well as some presence counseling. So if you join the From Schoolish to Self-Directed course, you'll see me there. And so I'm a big proponent of self-directed education. You don't have to you don't have to think that's what you want to do. I say definitely be open to it. When I first started, definitely coming out as a classroom teacher, I was definitely schoolish, and I thought we're going to do school at home and we're going to play school at home. And that's what we did. We played school for many years at home until my children were sick of it. And I found out this is not working. We have to figure out something else. And so just know wherever you're starting right now, it's okay. Like wherever you are, if you need a curriculum, get one. I will share some resources where you can find what you need. Some of us need a guide to start with. Some of us need that training wheel before before we can begin writing on our own. And so don't feel bad for where you are. Where you are is where you are. And as my dear elder sister mentor friend always says, I'm learning something new every day. And so if you take that on as a personal family's mantra, wherever you are right now, just know you're not going to be here in a year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. You're going to revisit these things and you're going to see how, I thought this was so important. And now it's just not important anymore. Something else I'll share as we close out is I tell people if I could start again, I would start over in a heartbeat and I'd do it all differently. I wouldn't have been so, you got to do this now and we got to do this and we got to keep up. I would let myself off the hook from feeling like I'm behind something outside of me, instead of knowing that what we set, what our standards are good enough. I wouldn't have been trying to do the most, like most people are always trying to do the most. Are we keeping up with everybody else? I would do enough. What's enough for us? Let me look back at our needs. Let me look back at our goals. Let me look back at our values. We can do just enough and be satisfied in knowing that that is enough. Whatever you're doing is enough. And so I encourage you in that personally, as a family, and definitely as you start looking to connect with other people. We need each other. Just like this conversation, I hope has been beneficial and uplifting to those of you listening in. Know that your presence in somebody else's life is going to do that same thing. So take those things that you're learning here, share them with somebody else. Find somebody in your community to share this with so that they're not feeling lost, so that they're not feeling topsy-turvy in this moment where a lot of people are feeling a sense of panic. So I just want to end with an invitation. I'd love for you to join me in the next conversation. It'll be in 2 weeks on August 3rd, same time, 7 p.m. here on Zoom. I'll be going into greater depth on how to engage community. Your family are key components to any community that you join. There's a way in which you need to be thoughtful about your engagement. Sometimes you think you join and I got in, I paid my fee, let's go. And you're not really thoughtful about things happening. And sometimes challenges do come up. Sometimes bad situations, bad experiences happen. And sometimes they can be avoided if we've just been a little more thoughtful. And so I'd like to have a conversation with you all about the things that I've learned from leading a community, from being in community, from joining a community, just to help you where you are so that you can have the best possible interactions as possible. The next conversation will be geared specifically to those who feel now called. You may be in a location where there's not a lot of community, there are not a lot of groups. You know that your family needs one. You know that your need for in-person contact is high. That's a high priority. So you may feel the calling that I need to go on and create what I need. I want to offer some tips, some best practices, just some shared experiences from my journey leading Kid Cultivators Homeschool Community. I've learned a lot during the last several years with this group. We've grown in a lot of different ways, and I would love to help anyone who would like to start not make the same missteps. Mine was basically trial and error, or taking advice that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. And of course, things are going to be different for everyone, wherever you are, with the people that you're with. But I just want to give you a helping hand to start that out. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, definitely sign up for it. It will take place on August 17th, again on Zoom at 7 p.m. Both of these conversations will be recorded for those who may not be able to make it at a later time, but do sign up so that you'll get the link when these recordings are shared. And with that, I just want to thank you. Thank you for taking this time with me and with those others who have joined. Thank you for those of you who smiled. I appreciated your smiles. Thank you those who gave me thumbs up. I saw some thumbs. Thank you. Thank you for those who nodded. Thank you for those who shared in the chat. Thank you for those who unmuted and actually spoke. Thank you. Each of you mattered. Our time together has been a sacred time. I just want to encourage you, leave you with this last word, that we are better together, and we are the ones we've been waiting for. So wherever you are in the world, know that this is your time to show up. This is your time to step and be with your family. Your family needs to be with others and be the people that we've been dreaming of all this time. We can do this now. So again, thank you. The last slide that's gonna come up is my contact information. If you would like to be in contact with me personally, you can find me on Instagram at Leslie W. Bray. My Gmail is lesliewbray@gmail.com. You can also follow the community I lead on Facebook and on Instagram. It's Kid Cultivators Homeschooling Community. We definitely share resources when we do workshops. We're figuring out how to translate them into being more virtual for people who can't be with us in person. And so I'd love to hear from you if that's something you're interested in reaching out and having further discussions. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. I wish you all well and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.